Thank you for joining us this evening, everyone, for a special session with the Honourable Helen Sham-Ho and councillor Philipa Veitch of Randwick City Council. We're really excited as the Soroptimist International Randwick Eastern Suburbs Club to be launching our extraordinary Women Speakers series this evening with our two special guests. My name is Lee-May Saw and I am one of our club members. And I would like to start with a welcome and an acknowledgement of country. I acknowledge the Aboriginal owners of the lands from which we meet today. As I am based from my home office, I acknowledge the Gadigal and Bidigal peoples who traditionally occupied the Sydney coast, and pay my respect to their elders, past and present, and also to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. As I previously mentioned, the session is being recorded and will be posted online subsequent to this evening. Just to give everyone a general outline of the order of proceedings for this evening, there'll be an interview and answer question with me posing questions to both of our speakers, and followed by an opportunity for everybody attending to have some questions put to each of the speakers. We do have a chat function running this evening, so you are certainly welcome to post any comments and questions that you might want us to put to the speakers at the end in the chat. And we will monitor the chat and ask a selected number of the questions, if there are many of those, towards the end of the session today. Now, I'm going to start with Philipa. Philipa, could you tell us a little bit about your background as a woman in politics and the journey which led you to become a woman councillor of Randwick City Council?
Okay, thank you, Lee-May, and hi everyone. I'd also like to acknowledge that we're meeting on stolen land. I'm sitting in my home today on unceded Bidjigal land, and Randwick Council is on Bidjigal and Gadigal land. And I would also like to acknowledge elders past and present and all Aboriginal people in attendance today. It's a long story, I suppose. I grew up in Brisbane. My mother was and is a very strong feminist, so I think she would be a very early influence. But it is interesting to reflect on those kind of early influences. And I think I grew up in Brisbane in Queensland in the 1970s and 80s. And that was really a time and a place for those who may or may not be familiar with the politics of that time. You know, there was a very corrupt government led by the then Premier Joe Bajocki-Peterson, and a fairly notorious Premier and government, and you just couldn't avoid politics even as a child and a teenager. And I sort of, giving away my age, I finished school at the end of 1988, bicentenary, and that was sort of at the height of the Fitzgerald inquiry. And I was hanging around waiting to wait for my sort of TE score, which is the Queensland Tertiary Entrance School, HSC school, and I actually hopped along and went to a couple of the hearings of the Fitzgerald inquiry and saw Joe testify, and that government came down. And so I just sort of developed a lifelong interest in politics. And, you know, I went on to study visual arts. That's been my main background. I really strongly believe there are very good connections within the arts and politics. I could rattle on for years for a long time. I don't want to bore everyone to death. But I guess I would say to people that, you know, the women out there are doing a lot of the work anyway. So, there's been a lot of theoretical inquiry over the last few decades about the role of care work and the caring economy, and how that sort of unacknowledged work, largely performed by women, whether it's in the domestic sphere, caring for children, caring for parents, doing that domestic labour, is just not incorporated and acknowledged in our sort of economic system. Many women are active in school PNCs and all sorts of organisations such as this, and many others that have been mentioned. And so women are there doing the work, but they're just largely not getting the opportunity to step up and make the decisions which they're perfectly capable of doing in a role as an elected representative, whether it be on council or state or federal government. And so I believe that women are very well placed to perform those roles, and just need the opportunity and encouragement and support to do so.
So what made you decide to become a member or run for Randwick Council?
It wasn't something I'd ever planned, to be honest, to run for council. Like a lot of people, well, not a lot of people, I joined a political party. I joined the Greens because I'm very, I guess it's the party that most represents sort of more progressive side of politics, and obviously protecting the environment. As soon as you join a political party, I'm sure Helen
yes
might concur on this, I don't know, but you are immediately asked to do all sorts of work. There are many, many jobs. It's like having another full-time job in the background on top of everything else you do. And with councils, Randwick has 5 council wards, and each of those wards you need to run 3 people, a lead candidate and 2 others to form a party ticket. And so every time, it's quite a lot of work to do, and we're always looking people to run. So I put my hand up and amazingly got elected.
Fantastic. Well, it's great to have women like you represented on our local council and supportive of our work and our organisation. Helen, could I ask you the same question, which is really targeted at getting you to introduce yourself? Could you tell us a little bit about your background as a woman in politics and the journey which led you to become a now retired Member of Parliament?
I suppose, first of all, I want to thank the Soroptimist Club for asking me to speak today. It is a very welcoming session because we are in a pandemic, and the fact that I can have an opportunity to speak and also speak about myself, which is very honor for me to have this opportunity. Maybe I should actually acknowledge country. I like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land and pay my respect to the elders, past, present, and emerging. Well, unlike most people here, I am actually a humble student when I first came to Australia to do my high school. And then, of course, I did my university as a social worker. Worked as a social worker in many years, over 10 years, in mainly hospitals. Did my law degree. Now, at this point of time, this when I started, not interested in politics, but certainly doing my law degree. The fact that I did a law degree was, I must thank our late former Prime Minister Gough Whitlam, because it was during that time, it was free tertiary education. It was my second degree, second profession, and it was free for me because at that time I was a single parent. So it started with law degree. Of course, that is when I started really had my political opportunity, all by chance. For people who might like to know, sometimes it's your fate. I felt it was a set of circumstances that I become a member of parliament at the end of the day, exactly same time as Philipa in 1988. I was elected on that year. People who are over 50 years of age should know me because they would have, for the Liberal Party people, I guess, who would have voted for me in 1988. That was with Nick Greiner in New South Wales with a landslide. that's how I got in. I think my mentor was, I think Lee-May will remember, Justice John Dowd. He was my supervisor at the time when I did my law degree. And then, of course, I had my practicum at Parliament House in New South Wales, in Sydney. And that's when I knew about politics. I know nothing about it. I actually joined the Liberal Party before that, accidentally, with a friend. We are going into detail there. So John Dowd was my mentor, really, and asked me, are you interested in politics? Exact words. I actually say, I have nothing to lose. And then I went for pre-selection, just like all the candidates. And because I was getting help from everybody else, I don't know, because I was a new member to the Liberal Party, and I got in, and I was elected as the second last member in the upper house. And that's how I actually got into politics, because I have a good education, I have a good mentor, and I have good faith in my life. So I just got in that way. Of course, when I was in Parliament, as Sumi introduced me, I was the very first Chinese member of Parliament. And I'm grateful, actually, not so much as an ethnic person. I was grateful for everybody, because at that time, the Chinese population wasn't very many. I cannot cite you the number, not like now, 1.2 million Chinese in Australia. There weren't that many ethnic people, although ethnic was very popular, that term, non-English speaking background, in other words. So I was a non-English speaking background person, first one of Chinese heritage to be elected. So I'm very proud of myself, but I attribute it to the people who elected me, actually, because I don't think it was from the Chinese community as a whole. Anyway, when I got in, I was new. There's no guidebook in Parliament. When you got in, you are on your own. The party, of course, is where you have your anchor. You get your briefing notes and everything else, because I was in government with Griner, who was the Premier at the time. I was very fortunate. I had 4 terms there. So elected in 1988, by the way, it was the year of the dragon in Chinese zodiac. So I got in there. I was there for 4 terms. Initially, as you know, it wasn't fixed term. It was 3 to 4 years. So the first term was 3 years. New South Wales had a referendum. And then after the referendum, it's 4 years term. So I have altogether just over 15 years in Parliament, in New South Wales upper house. When I was there, as a woman, I have to say, there was only including me, 6 women in the upper house on the Liberal Party, on the Liberal Party side. May I say that I had to work really very hard, not because of my language difficulty or anything like that. I have a good background. I have good educational background, good community background. But just that is my personal drive, motivation to do better, to make the world change to the better, if I may say so. So I work very hard. I really work, I would say normally, I work about 16 hours a day. I usually is almost the last one from Parliament House to leave Parliament. The security guard used to check my office every time I'm still there, that kind of thing. So it was good fun, but it was also very hard working. People don't realize member of Parliament on a whole work very hard, very long hours. In those days, of course, we don't have family friendly hours. We work until about 1 or 2 in the morning. My longest session is over 34 hours. A meeting, a session, a sitting, we call. Anyway, it was an exciting time for me. I never lost my excitement when I was there. It was really not a dedication per se. It was like I'm in drugs, I'm sort of got hooked in that profession. So if I may say something positive about being a member of Parliament, I think I feel this is the highest calling in community service, highest because of the sacrifices you have to give, including your own family and your personal life. Well, this is about it, unless you want me to get into what member of parliament do. I think most people do, make law. We make many laws, but many laws to me is not quite necessary, but all the same, we did. Of course, because I was very focused on social justice. In fact, our acknowledgement and welcome to country was started in the 1990s. In 1990, that was my most rewarding 10 years because I was in the Aboriginal Reconciliation Council member. We were the one who actually proposed to the federal parliament to have that to start parliament. So I'm very proud to be saying that. So I'm just a very proud woman, Chinese woman, a Chinese ethnic woman, to be in parliament. I think people should ask me a question because it's just such a long role for me in parliament. And I'm really grateful to be in Australia. Of course, I came from Hong Kong. People said that. I don't have any of my family, my procreation family here, but I have now 2 daughters who were born here and 6 grandchildren who are born here. And they are half Chinese in my 3rd generation. Very proud to be more or less living here and not going anywhere because all my other family are in Canada. They're all Canadians. I am the only Australian who are sham. I think that's enough for this at this point.
Thank you, Helen. And thank you so much for your contribution as the first Chinese Member of Parliament. You've been a little bit like a big sister or second mum to me, and I know that you mentor a lot, including many young lawyers and many young politicians as well. So thank you for all the work that you've done. Without the contributions of women like you and Philipa, change really can't happen. So I'll move on to the next question, or one of the next questions that we had in the list. Philipa, what inspires you to get up every morning and keep doing what you do?
That's another good question. I think, like Helen, I'm very motivated by a sense of, fighting for social justice. There is huge inequality in our society and across the globe at the moment. And I guess as someone who's an MP or MLC and to a larger extent and to a slightly lesser extent as a councillor, you are meeting a lot of people, encountering people who are really doing it tough. And we have a really long way to go on many levels, particularly I think women especially really do have it tough, especially if you are a single mum. You're trying to look after your kids, you're trying to earn an income or sort of get by on sort of Centrelink payments. I've met quite a number of women who are here on temporary visas or student visas who happen to get pregnant and have children, or here on pandemic visas, and I can tell you it's pretty tough. It's beyond tough. So just to be able to help people is a strong motivator. And I guess the other one is really climate change. I just feel that's something we all need to be working on every single day, doing what we can, because the threat is just so extreme, and you only need to read the science that is there and now readily available, particularly with the latest IPCC report. If we don't do something now, it's the impacts are going to be catastrophic, quite frankly. I think the real impacts need to be discussed a lot more more freely. So those would be my two big motivating forces. And a lesser one is, I guess, my background in the arts, and traditionally particularly in councils, particularly on somewhere like Randwick Council. If you kind of look back at the makeup of councils over the years, in Randwick we've only had 3 female mayors. 2 of those have just been on this term. We still only have 5 out of 15 councillors are women. Before that, it would typically be maybe 2 women on Randwick Council out of 15. So it's pretty poor representation, and I think you can see that reflected in the type of community infrastructure in your local area. You know, with no art centres, not many community council-run childcare centres. You know, a lot of the things that women might value aren't there to the extent that they should be. And so there's a lot of other things like that you can do. Not that all women are interested in the arts, but many women are interested in sport, and that's great. But there just needs to be a balance, and I think there's often not a balance, and that's just a reflection of lack of broad diversity and gender equity on councils and in government.
I was interested in hearing more about your background in the arts, Philipa, because you mentioned previously that you feel with the background in arts that there's an intersection between your artistic background and your political career. Do you have a specialisation or particular medium when it comes to the arts? I understand you're a visual artist. And are there any skills that you have learnt and developed from that area of your life that you have found helpful in your political career?
Thanks, Lee-May. Look, I studied painting. I'm not a painter anymore. Like a lot of artists, I sort of took on a bit of an interdisciplinary kind of practice, working across a lot of mediums, and sort of it developed into quite a conceptual practice. But I think probably the main thing you take away, particularly as an Australian artist where there's not much support for the arts, you have to become very resourceful. You have to be able to represent your work, talk about your work. You have to be able, in this modern age, you have to be able to build a website, promote yourself on social media, chat to people, keep your CV up to date, learn a lot of skills, because most of the time you can't, you're not making a living out of your work. So it might be through teaching or through other things like that. And so you actually develop a really broad set of skills that you can then take on and apply to your work in politics. And I think, you know, I studied at Sydney College of the Arts, and at that time, in the sort of early 90s, that particular art college was a very conceptual art school. We'd learned a lot of critical theory. There wasn't much focus on learning actual skills of making artwork, but we did study feminism. We did study, you know, French critical theory. We did study the German philosophers. It wasn't very political at the time, I have to say. But yeah, it's that breadth that you get from any of the arts, and the humanities, I think. That's not just business, anyone who's a lawyer, I'm incredibly impressed, because I sort of vaguely regret not studying law myself. But
well, I mean,
there are other professions, and it's not just the arts. I think it's partly saying, doesn't matter what profession or non-profession you come from, you've got what it takes if you're interested and have got half a brain to actually get up there and get involved in politics. Because, Helen, I don't know about you, but certainly my experience on council is that most women could just floor a lot of the people there, that the bar is not very high. So women should definitely have a go, and they would make a great contribution.
So, you know, often as women, we talk about the importance we're passionate about diversity, and there's a lot of discussion these days about the importance of diverse thinking. So I think, you know, that idea of critical and creative thinking and the diversity represented by both of you is perhaps something we're highlighting a little bit this evening, which is fantastic. I think this is a bit of a shorter question for you. Which celebrity or community leader have you always wanted to meet and why?
So is that for me or for Helen?
For Helen.
Yes.
Oh, for me, I didn't know that.
Sorry, I'll just repeat the question.
And it's a celebrity. Well, with celebrity, I don't sort of get into the entertainment side, of course. I just perhaps go back to my political side. You mean at this time or at the time when I was a member of parliament?
Well, I guess either. Just name one and tell us why.
Well, I met a lot of head of states in different countries, actually, particularly from China, of course. I met, I would say, well, like American people, American presidents who came, like Bush and Clinton. I have to say, at the time when I wanted to meet is really, for myself, the Chinese president. But now, you ask me now, it's now Xi Jinping, whom I already met before. But before, he was different because China it was at least 4 or 5 years ago. But now, somehow, China, obviously, I think everyone knows at this point that there is tension between Australia and China. I dearly love to meet this president again from China because, of course, when I met him last time, there was a whole big group of Chinese taking photos and all that. Twice he came. Twice I saw him, but only sort of shake your hand and that's it. Say how I'm very well with that kind of exchanges. But I really like to meet him to talk about, can we actually somehow change gear in terms of relationship, diplomatic relationship, particularly in more or less geopolitical side of it between Australia and China. I'm very disappointed at the moment with my own political situation in Australia. People say, oh, there is politics. It's not politics. It's more than just politics in my mind. It's people. Because politics is about people, really. So I really feel that that this person that I want to meet, but not because he's powerful, but because I'm Chinese, but I'm in Australia. I feel at the moment, feel very oppressed somehow. I shouldn't feel. I'm usually a very confident person, but I feel oppressed because there's so much Chinese racism around. People don't feel it. I do somehow. I don't know whether you do, Lee-May, but certainly I have friends who actually not complain per se. We talk about it. That's why I'm only busy talking on the phone, of course. But people just have that uneasy feeling, if not oppressed feeling. So I just like to do that, partly because like all presidents of any country, they are so up high, because I was in politics, I know what's like talking to even the premier, you have certain due respect to give it to them. But just like a friendly talk to these kind of powerful people on a more level equal basis to discuss what are they doing, what are they doing to people? Do they know about it? Like, as a past politician, in a sense, I should know this because I am a very community-minded person. You know that. Even now, as I was saying, I have a lot of younger people who, in a sense, I'm mentoring myself, who are interested in politics. We never talk about that kind of politics, that kind of issues, but we just talk about systems and policies. But this meeting people is so important to enlarge your thinking. I just like to know his thinking. So I don't know, maybe it is only a wishful thinking.
Thank you, Helen. I think you've touched on quite a controversial area. I'm so pleased that politicians aren't afraid of doing that. But also for you saying you are usually a confident person, I think your positivity on that topic is still very much shining and coming across. So thank you so much for that. Philipa, Reflecting back to your childhood, what advice would you give to your primary school self?
Oh, gee, that's that's interesting. Hang in there and stick to your guns, I think. You know, I have to say it was, pretty challenging, I would say. Primary school, I went to a Catholic primary school in Brisbane, and not a terrible, it's a well-off area now, like a lot of inner-city areas, but at the time, none of us were well off at all. It was okay, but yeah, I would just say keep doing what you're doing, you know, just study hard. And I would say there's a bigger picture out there, you know, you'll get through, and you know, you won't be stuck here in Brisbane forever. So apologies to anyone else. I left there as soon as I finished school. It's probably quite different now.
I'll start with you again, Philipa, with this question. In your view, do you think there's anything that local community groups and local businesses can do to help women and children in the community?
Yeah, I think there's a lot. I think there's just so much to be done. I mean, I'm very fortunate. You know, I'm married. My kids are teenagers now. They're grey hair, went grey pretty young. But I wouldn't have had a hope doing it when they were younger, just because of the balance of our work at home. So, you know, for those people who are, you know, I suppose places like councils can actually provide that kind of support for childcare and for things like that, for women, and actually understand what they're going through and provide that kind of support, and maybe community spaces for women to get together. Like, we've got lots of old halls and quite nice new halls, but people just tend to hide them. So maybe groups such as yourselves, you know, can reach out somehow and provide that space like this to talk, you know, and just have these kind of conversations. So finding out what, I think everyone has a role to play in finding out what the women need and what they want. That's probably the main thing. Ask women in the area, what do you want? What do you need? And actually reach out and then go through it and give it to them, basically.
Great. Well, one of the ideas is to, when we can go back to in person, to continue to run this monthly speaker series. And I understand that you've mentioned to me, Philipa, that you're keen to work with us on projects and to attend our meetings and events moving forward. So that would be really fantastic to have your support and to have you as somebody on council who we can work with. Helen, I might ask you the same question. Do you think that there's anything that local community groups and local businesses can do to help women and children in the community?
I was going to ask a question myself. What is the business? What do you mean by business groups? You mean I don't understand the question very well, to be frank.
Well, I guess local businesses, at the moment, we're in a COVID environment.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, and businesses are all affected. So I guess it's probably a little bit in everyone's interests, whether you're a community group or a business, to work together on certain issues.
I suppose women and children are very much like everybody else, men or women, old or young. We all have the same problem of more or less isolation in a sense, because your normal activities are not being carried on. You have a day. I actually said to my daughter last time I saw her, I said, it seems, you know, people may have seen this picture, a Groundhog Day, because every day is the same. Whereas when you go to work, it's different. So with business, I actually didn't go to the shop that much in recent months. So with the pandemic, I cannot really tell how say the shopping center can help. A few times I actually went to the shops. They were closed. They cannot do anything for any women or any men being matter. So I find that question very difficult to answer in this pandemic time. But one question I'd actually like to say, perhaps because I haven't received that many sort of aged care service at all, because I'm over 70, I actually felt that because I got the benefit of my children and my independence all this time, so I don't feel the isolation that much. But I can say a few people older about my age, I feel that they need some extra care. In fact, for me, I can't do a lot because of the pandemic. The business, you know how usually they can have takeaway, can have online deliver. Mm-hmm. Many older people, even like my age, people in the 70s, 60, they can't do that because they have delivery fee of $5 or $10 extra. They might not be able to afford it because it's 3 meals a day. You don't want to call on those meals on wheels because you're not that up to that disabled but kind of disadvantaged group yet. So it is in one of I will feel that the business can help is to help those community group to help people who are in need or who are vulnerable. I think that is neat, particularly for the age group, for the aged women in particular, aged men too, I guess. But that's for aged people generally. For children, I feel sorry for them actually, because my grandchildren, they can't go to, they haven't been, well, except now going to, they haven't been to school, so they're bored. They didn't like it. I can tell you, my 2 grandchildren who are in school and not in university at that time last year, and this year the younger one, they're in high school. They hate it. They don't like online. So they need more help from outside people, apart from their own family, I suppose. But then you can't see. So the question is so hard. I find it very hard to answer the question, I'm afraid. I have things to do myself. As I say, I can do my housework. I'm a reader anyway, so I read my things. I watch television. I talk to my friends. But not many people are as resourceful as I am and independent as I am. So I can feel for these people that perhaps the business can join with the community group. But then they are in problem. They have problem themselves, They don't have business, so they don't have the income. So it's bad all around. I'm afraid, sorry, I cannot answer the question properly.
I think that's the most negative I've heard you come across this evening, Helen.
Could I jump in for a second? Just sorry, it's Philipa, because the COVID thing is really difficult. But we have a local business where I live. It's a pharmacy. And if every business was like that, the world would be a different place, because it's in a little shopping centre village near where I live, and there's a lot of public housing, so a lot of disadvantaged people in the area. There's a little kind of bit of park, next to it, and they put on a fun run. They put on stuff for Mother's Day. They put on an art show. They just have stuff happening all the time, an Easter bonnet parade, and they really engage with the community. They don't get any money for it. I think council gives them a little bit, but the amount that they give out to the local community, just in terms of putting on these kind of events, they're 2 brothers who run it, and they've both received Orders of Australia. I've not ever seen another business like that, but it is possible.
Fantastic.
It is possible.
There's a few stories of, I think, local businesses, despite the current climate, actually really, volunteering their services. I think I saw something online about a restaurant owner, continuing to run his business from home, but offering meals to the community for free and that sort of thing, because food is an issue in the current environment. So sometimes it's a little bit like, disastrous circumstances can bring out the best in people. So I guess we're probably a little bit lucky in Sydney at the moment, because we are on the cusp of lockdown conditions potentially easing, particularly from Monday of next week. So it would certainly be fantastic to see groups like us, Soroptimist, International Randwick Eastern Suburbs Club, and local businesses coming together to continue to make things better and to, develop change for women and children in the community. Now, I'm just going to do a little bit of a wrap-up question before we take a look at what's been posted on chat, and otherwise open up for questions from everybody else here this evening. Helen, do you have any further comments that you wish to add before we invite others to put their questions?
I prefer people to ask questions, actually.
Okay. Philipa, was there anything else that you wanted to add?
No, I've probably rattled on enough. So yeah, happy to take any questions.
I think I saw a question just pop up on chat. I'll ask it to you first, Helen. Is there anything, what do you think can be done to make things easier for women in politics?
Yes, that's a good question, actually, because I really find that when you are in Parliament, I suppose, well, everything is politics. In Parliament, if we need support, we need actually, because as I was saying before, there's no guidance, there's no guideline. So you are very much alone, particularly being a new member. You have never been in Parliament. You are quite alone. People say, oh, your party, Philipa was saying the party will support you. They support you to a certain extent. But once you are in there, within the party, actually, you are quite alone. You know why? Because it's very competitive, actually. You know, that they have, just like any other career path. It is a career. You have to start with an ordinary member, a new member. And then you become a senior member because you've been there for a long time, right? So, but nobody tell you what to do. You have to fumble around. So you become a parliamentary secretary or a committee chairman, which I was at the end. My second half of my career. So, but you are very much on your own, and that's why you need some support. So you organize your own support group more or less inside Parliament from your colleagues. That's why I started Parliamentary Lions Club, for example. I started the Asian Pacific Friendship Group, that kind of thing, so that people of like-minded sense will support one another. So we women in particular, because I'm fortunate to have a lot of education behind me. So I am not being looked down but I was questioned about my language. I don't think I have any language problem. I've been here for a long time. They say they cannot understand my English. A colleague questioned my English. I was stunned because I said, look, I did 11 years of university. I did my social work for 5 years with social and arts, and I did my law degree. Mm-hmm. How can you don't understand it? So they inadvertently sort of undermine my own confidence. You know what I mean? As you know, being a lawyer, you have to speak. So that kind of thing, I need the support of other women to say, look, you are doing a good job. Nobody will say that you're doing a good job. Nobody will say to a politician to say you're doing a good job. You know that? Funny thing. Now, mind you, I got all the feedback now that I was doing a good job. I was, but I feel I have done my job quite properly and quite well. But at the time, it's very isolated as a politician. So although I urge young people to get in, this is it. The more the people who, you don't have to be a Chinese or Vietnamese or an Asian. You can be just, you are Australian. You are Chinese Australian or Vietnamese Australian or different background. Doesn't matter. As long as you have something in common. So what I'm saying is that women in particular can support one another more because at least there's some commonality. You're being a woman, you know, there's certain expectation of a woman. I think that's important can identify one another's personal standing. That is very important to my mind, the support for a women politician. Like now, I feel very at ease because somehow we seem to have more understanding with one another.
Sure. I think you raise a really important point. You know, I think both you and Philipa have highlighted some very challenging periods of time in the history of Australian politics. And I'm always learning more about, you know, some of the things that you've gone through while you were in Parliament, Helen, and it just, you know, amazes me how you can still sit here today and talk to us with this amazing smile on your face and positive attitude. So I think that message is really essential about women supporting each other. There's another
one more comment I'd like to make is for people who want to go to politics. I think one main thing is you have to like people, meeting people, because politics is to me, it's about people, to help people or to talk to people or to find out solution for problem associated with people. I think that's a very important point. If you are shy or you are stubborn, forget it. You cannot do that. You have to be a very outgoing kind of person. That's my comment. That I think women in particular, you need that kind of common feeling.
Or if you're shy, forget about being shy and learn to speak up, perhaps. There's a question for Philipa from Terry. Philipa, could you tell us more about your work in prisons?
Yeah, sure. Look, I live in Maroubra. I don't live that far from Long Bay Jail. And when I moved into the area quite a long time ago, I always thought, it'd be interesting to work there, but I had no idea how, really. And then a few years ago, a job came up, which was at the Burngate Gallery, which is an inmate art gallery. Next year will actually be its 30th anniversary. It's one of the few inmate art galleries in the world. There's not that many of them. It's probably one of the longest running. And so that's where I started, and I worked there part-time. So we go up into the jails. Prison is a little bit like a university campus. They're quite big areas with different buildings. Perhaps some of the lawyers in the room tonight have been there. You're nodding.
I have, but I'm not a criminal lawyer. So
yes, and I love working there. I have to say, it's what it really shows. It's really inspiring. Of course, there's actually, unfortunately, the two co-workers I work with had worked there for many years as educators. Yep. And maybe 6 or 7 years ago, unfortunately, the state government really basically slashed the education funding from corrective services, and so there's very little education happening in the jails, and certainly the music and art programs were just cut. So there's not much available to inmates, but they kept the gallery going, and so we basically sort of, I guess, develop a bit of a relationship, for want of a better word, with certain inmates who want to paint. Some of them are already very good. It originally came as a result of all the work that was coming through the art program. So there were some people who established these terrific art programs in correction centres across New South Wales, and they were almost at a diploma level, they were like a TAFE course. People were studying, 4 or 5 days a week, producing this amazing work, and that's how the gallery's set up. Now we don't have that education, but we're still finding that people are making incredible work. And, I guess it's a reflection of the high level of First Nations, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander incarceration rates. But the majority of the artists that exhibit with us are First Nations artists, Aboriginal artists. They are amazing. And there's certain little kind of wings, so to speak, where you kind of almost get like a little art group going, and they might have a spare cell and they're just pumping out these artworks, and it's amazing to see. It's amazing to see. And I've done some through that. I've also done some work. So that's at Long Bay. There's another organisation called the Community Restorative Centre. Again, some of the lawyers here might have heard of them. They do work. They're an NGO who do work with inmates pre and post-release. There's a fantastic local Maroubra guy called Murray Cook. He's a musician. He ran the music programs in Long Bay for about 20 years before he got the sack. He's a bit of a local legend. He's a surfer. He played with Midnight Oil and Mental as Anything and Mixed Relations. He's a total legend. And so he goes around. I got the work through him. He basically goes around the jails recording songs, doing these 4-week songwriting programs. The guys and the women basically write songs, they record them, and then he mixes them, and there's a couple of CDs. And actually, if you have the current edition of Rolling Stone, there is an article about him, which is pretty amazing. And so the CRC also run some art programs, and so I've been fortunate to be able to do some art programs. I did one and they were at Long Bay, at Narranura, which was the drug and alcohol rehab centre that closed. There's no one in jail has any drug and alcohol. There's no one there with addictions. There's no drugs in jail, so they shut that down. And so I did some there, and then I also did some out at Mary Wade, which was a maximum security, women's maximum security jail. They've given that, it was quite a nice place. It used to be a juvenile detention centre out near Silverwater. And of course, they've given that to the guys now. They've kicked the women out of the nice jail and they've given it back to the blokes. So, yeah, it's very interesting. You meet some interesting people with some amazing life stories, that's for sure.
Thank you so much for that. I wasn't actually aware, although I've been to Long Bay Prison, I wasn't aware of the gallery being so it was really interesting to hear about that. I am aware, though, that, you know, for many vulnerable people who end up in prisons, that unfortunately it's during their time in prison when they can actually access education and things like art. So it's so wonderful to hear the difference that programs that you've been involved with are making. There's one last question which I sort of saved to last because it's quite a meaty one. It's from Caroline Webber, and I may actually, because I've had a little bit of experience with this, have a go at answering it a bit myself and then throw it across to Helen and Philipa. Caroline's question is, are there any implications of being a women-only organisation? I'm the current president of the Society of Women Writers Victoria. There are branches in New South Wales, Western Australia, Queensland and Tasmania. Recently, the Tasmanian branch has raised the question of men becoming members. So I guess my experience with this issue is that I have been the president of the Women Lawyers Association of New South Wales twice over. And during my first term as president of Women Lawyers, as a very young solicitor, we actually introduced under our constitution for the first time associate membership for men. So legally and constitutionally, one of the relevant issues is whether the men actually get voting rights, which we decided they shouldn't. Of course, my male boss at the time, who I persuaded to sign up as one of our first male associate members, threatened to run as president of the first male president of the Women Lawyers Association of New South Wales, which obviously he wasn't able to do, given he did not hold a voting right. But many years later, during my second term as president, after I came to the bar and became a barrister, we actually decided to particularly amend our constitution so it made it very clear that associate members and men were unable to stand for positions on the committee and for positions on the executive, such as for the role of president. The reason why we decided to introduce associate membership for men was because we felt that, although we were a women's organisation who had quite a bit of influence and have been politically involved at an advocacy level, involved in many key issues since formation in 1952, it is certainly essential in our profession to work with the men that hold the power, because otherwise it can be a very slow journey in trying to influence meaningful change anytime soon. So we had always had a bit of a history of inviting people like the male president of the Bar Association or Justice John Dowd or the Chief Justice of New South Wales to our key events and meeting with them where we could to advocate for issues important to women, and, you know, with a great deal of success. So that is why we decided to introduce associate membership for men. But I am also aware that, because I've served on our national board as well, that not all states and territories have been quite as keen on that idea, and many of the smaller jurisdictions, they just haven't been able to even, you know, put a motion up at an AGM or anything like that, because it's just too controversial. That said, many of the other state bodies also have a similar practice of working with, you know, men in key leadership positions and men who are supportive of the objects of our organisation. Philipa and Helen, well, Philipa first, I guess, did you have anything that you wanted to say or add about that topic or that issue?
I think the model you proposed is probably quite a good one, associate membership. I guess there's also the issue of sort of cis and transgender. You know, I don't know if that's something that's come up, so that's something worth considering as well, I guess. Yeah, I think there is a place for, you know, women, and that's a broad, you know, broad understanding of how you identify as a woman, you know. I'm not talking about cisgender organisations, but I think there's the associate membership idea is quite a good one, and sort of retaining that control over the elected positions and voting rights seems quite good.
And I guess part of the...
Helen's been involved in a lot of organisations, and she...
The sound sort of...
on this.
Yeah, the sound sort of on my feed broke up a little bit. I think Philipa was saying, Helen, that it would be interesting to get your opinion on this.
What is the specific point that was the question? I wasn't quite clear.
Well, the question is, are there any implications of being a women-only organisation?
Yeah.
That's the particular question. And then the context is that Caroline is the current president of the Society of Women Riders Victoria, and there's been an issue for their Tasmanian equivalent organisation of men becoming members.
Well, it depends on the nature of the association. I personally, at this moment, I'm not talking about past time now, I belong to 4 very specific called Chinese Women Association. That particular one has been in Australia for 67 years this year, okay? Because recently we have meetings. I have started one called Way In Network, which is just about 30 years next year, right? I'm also belong to 2. One is Australian Chinese United Women Association, which started about 3 or 4 years ago. Another one is about same time, 4 or 5 years ago, called Australian Chinese Entrepreneur Women Association, right? So they are all with different membership because of the focus. All of them this year, mind you, have met because of Mother's Day and International Women's Day. I have to say that. This year, as you know, the pandemic, but the only association activity I made is this 4 association. And they are so specific because the topic is quite open to men and women. But the association itself, when they have association meeting, they're mainly women, their own membership. But other activities is all open to their husband, sons, son-in-law, friends. So it doesn't matter. To me, if you want to be associate member, why? Because you don't come to the meeting anyway. You just come to the activities. And activities usually for any association these days, as I see it, I go to a lot of activities for different associations. They're open to, almost open to public. You know what I mean? As long as you pay your due, I suppose, when you eat or something. So I just feel men can have their own association, because sometimes, you know how some women, they talk nonsense actually, and we enjoy it because they're all women's things.
That's a very good point.
So you have certain kind of women's topic, like cosmetics, like make up yourself. Men don't do that much, but we like flowers. Actually, the very last topic we have in that we was about how to plant orchids, how to plant, just make flower planting. That kind of thing. Men will probably we want to have a vegetable. So there is a specific topic, and I actually feel that nowadays you don't have to belong to actual association to be a committee member. You can be just come in and join in the activities. That's the whole point of being an association, to organize something for everybody to enjoy. That's my point. But for combined, why not? If it is, say, Rotary Club or even Soroptimist, in a sense, it is a service club. So service to everybody in a sense, but focus on women. So when you have women's association, you can just focus on women's needs, because we do have special needs or different needs. So I think it's called, like Soroptimist, for example, that my women's group, because they have special needs. When I started the women's group way in 30 years ago, because there was a lot of immigrants, and the husband all sort of travel between, we call astronauts actually, between Hong Kong and Australia. So the women here was left behind with the children attending school or something. So I had to group them to give them support. That was my whole focus. Give them support, give them something to do, be more constructive, be more participatory. That's called weigh-in, is mainstreaming, I call it. Mainstreaming, weigh-in is mainstreaming. That was the name, the meaning of the name. So I feel that depends on why you want the group, why the purpose, the focus of the constitution or the aim of the group, the purpose of the group. So I don't think it's necessary every group has to be open to everybody, because the committees usually are just to organize things. Really, the members to attend. So members, I think if it was the men, they can come too if they really want to. When there's activity, it doesn't matter to me. But there are times that women's group have this special needs. That's it. So I stop at that, because of the fact that we do have differences of needs between men and women, even now.
Right. I think you raised some really good points, and I think we probably had quite a balanced discussion about some of the relevant aspects. I'm going to hand over to Johanna now to give a bit of a thank you and a closing, and to tell us a little bit about what our Soroptimist Randwick Eastern Suburbs Club has been up to, and how you might be able to continue to stay involved with our club.
Hi, my name is Johanna. I'm the current president of the Soroptimist Club Randwick and Eastern Suburbs. And Lee-May, first of all, I'd like to thank you for being an incredible host or MC. And Philipa and Helen, thank you so much for being part of our first extraordinary speaker series. We're so excited to have you here, and it was such an interesting evening. So thank you, and I hope everyone else thought the same and enjoyed it as much as I did. I wanted to also touch on Soroptimist and explain a little bit about what we're about. And the last question was quite interesting, because Soroptimist International is an international women's service organization, volunteer. We're all volunteers. And the reason it happened 100 years ago, you can see. We just had the birthday celebrations online, sadly, because of COVID, this weekend. The organization the first club was started in 1921 in the US by a very brave woman who decided that it was not fair that her husband or men were allowed to attend these clubs like Rotary or service organizations, and women weren't. And so she created her own, which is fabulous. The name Soroptimist is sometimes a bit of a hurdle for some people to get their head around. But it's actually a very lovely meaning. It means Sororis Optimae in Latin, and means best sisters, or as I would say, brings out the best in women by women. But going back to the last question we had, where should men be upset that they can't join, or are they allowed to join or not? Especially in our club, we've always encouraged the Soroptimisters. So they may not necessarily hold a position or be members, but they're surely part of the family and part of the whole structure. Because, you know, if you have a family, you might have your husband or your partner of any kind looking after the family if there is one, or if, you know, you always have support in one way or another. I think the men are not excluded, but the reason this club was created was because there was no available club for women. I think you need to also look at the backgrounds of why that was. Now, I think in general we're looking at maybe changing something, but there is service clubs around for men. Truly, men are welcome in our clubs as support. But yeah, anyway, so there's. I think, Caroline, coming back to your question, your situation might be a little bit different in the writers' world, but yes. Anyway, let me explain a little bit more about Soroptimism while I'm in this week. We work we're an international organization, as I started off, and we actually work on local levels, regional levels, and international levels, and we're sometimes sadly the world's best kept secret. But we've been having fantastic programs going, and sort of tirelessly, I suppose, work on it. It would be great we hope with series like this, or speaker series like this, we can create a bit more awareness and invite more members to join us and help us bring out the best in women and children, and helping children and women in need. Our focus is literacy for children, is equality for women, and peace as well. We actually have a very wide-ranging footprint and outreach, and we've got we're represented in the UN as well on a consulting status. So it is quite an international organization, and we're working locally to get more awareness. In Australia, we've got about 60 clubs. Worldwide, we've got about 72,000 members in 121 countries. And coming down to our club locally, the Randwick Club has been is now 68 years young. So we've been around for quite a bit as well. And we work with local organizations or create our own projects. One of which is we work with rural midwives, and we sponsor a rural midwife sponsorship program, which sadly for the last 2 years, again due to COVID, hasn't taken place. But we would sponsor a rural midwife to come and attend the National Midwifery Conference, and then go on to a two-week training, or 2-week interaction session, I should say, with the Royal Hospital for Women, with the midwives there. And it's a great exchange between rural and city midwives, and really learning. They're both learning from each other in their practices, and how resourceful they have to be, or what is the latest in the midwifery world. The other projects we work on is, as I said before, literacy. So we work really closely with local public schools in the eastern suburbs. And it all started with La Perouse, with the primary La Perouse public school, which Philipa, you may know as well. It's sort of down your area where you live. And we opened, or we created, a book box. And I sort of like to say that we were the one of the first ones, let's say, to create these public book boxes, or book libraries, street libraries, I suppose. But ours is connected to the La Perouse school, and it was meant for children to be able to still get books if they don't have it at home as a natural given, that they can go and lend or book or return them at their own time without any limits or penalties. We've done that. We've extended that now to other local schools as well. We hope to increase the numbers there. We also work with Royal Hospital for Women on other projects like the baby bundles. Before the government introduce them. We actually had them already at the Royal Hospital for Women in Randwick, and it's got little items for mothers who were vulnerable or who just had an emergency dash to the hospital to give birth and had nothing on them. It also is, we've now introduced a perinatal mother's bag for mothers who, again, who are vulnerable and need a little bit of support. The other areas we're working on has been domestic violence, and sadly through the COVID pandemic, we've all seen that there has been a steep rise in numbers relating, or in cases relating to domestic violence, and we work closely with some women's shelters, and we also work with the Bayside Women's Shelter, and so have been creating a nice relationship with them to support them. And actually, we've seen there were some donations tonight, so I really thank everyone who has done so. It will be all going to the Bayside Women's Shelter, and it's for women obviously finding a shelter, women and families when they have the need to do so, to find a roof over their head, but also then to start a new era to prepare themselves for and their children for a new life outside. So any donations there are very welcome, and thank you very much. And that is one of our projects. Then we have, I think that's probably enough of projects, but yes. So if you have any questions, we'd love to hear from you afterwards. If you have any more questions on Soroptimist in general, please do send us a note or contact us. I also wanted to just, if I may, say that we're very excited that we will continue this series, and we have our next series booked in for November the 3rd, and it will be again. Well, it could be face to face. That would be lovely. Although I must say, tonight we've had some lovely faces from all around the world. We've got Scotland and we've got interstate, and so that's, I suppose, the beauty of having Zoom, to be able to welcome everyone into these sessions. But it could be a face-to-face session, and otherwise it will be Zoom again. And it's Extraordinary Women in IT. So the idea is really to bring out different areas where women have been extraordinary. Thanks, Helen and Philipa. And also what you would give them as ideas or guidelines of how to reach to the point where you are, and things you've learned that could be avoided or that should definitely be repeated. So hopefully the speaker series will be giving good idea and advice. Sorry, that was quite lengthy, but thank you.
Oh, good.
Thank you, Johanna. Thank you, Helen and Philipa. And thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. And if you're able to, we look forward to having you join us on the 3rd of November for our Women in IT session.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so very much. What a great night.
Thank you.